All right, folks, welcome. I am here with no other than Mr. Jeff Nyquist. Mr. Nyquist is an expert on a variety of different subjects, some of which we are both highly knowledgeable in. Today, we're going to be talking about Trump. We're going to be talking about Russia. And we're going to be talking about the upcoming military exercise in Belarus between Russia and the Belarusian military. And we're also going to be talking about some things we've heard about Trump and his relationship with the Russian government, Putin, the KGB, and other things. So with that, Mr. Nyquist, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Anytime. It's our pleasure to have you, as always. We've had you here before, and folks really enjoyed that. So I figured we would have you here again. And folks can follow along on this if they've got questions for you. They can ask those later. So we'll save those towards the end here. I'm planning on spending at least an hour with Mr. Nyquist, however much time he has available for us. We'll do that. We're also going to be showing the KLW World News Map, showing military locations in and around Belarus. So we're going to be talking about S-400 missile sites. We're going to be talking about the military training exercises. We're going to be talking about the training areas and how these military training areas have constantly been upgraded over the last few months. So with that, Mr. Nyquist, I'll let you start out however you so choose, sir.
Oh, well, I guess I could talk about the fact of the strategy that Russia and China are pursuing. It is true, despite what anyone thinks, that China and Russia are allied. We had the defector Colonel Stanislav Lunev, who came across in March of 1992, who spoke Mandarin, worked in China, a Russian GRU military colonel. I think he's the highest ranking GRU official ever to defect. He was the deputy head of the GRU in the United States when he defected. And he had information that China and Russia at the end of the Cold War got together, and their intelligence services formed a formal alliance where all their operations against the United States were combined. And they had a long-range plan to destroy the United States, to isolate and destroy it, and to bomb and invade North America, Russia getting Alaska and parts of Canada, and China getting the lower 48 states, with other countries invited in for looting rights. So as inconceivable as this strategy may seem, you need to somehow get the United States to destroy its own alliance system and isolate itself. And you had the remarkable occasion of people with communist background, like the Clintons, like Obama, like Biden, who was a shill for Russia when he was in the Senate. You look at the Bukovsky papers, and you have them as president, and you think, well, they're the ones that are going to withdraw from NATO, right? They're the ones that are going to mess up the alliance system. No, no, no. I'm afraid that they're really so afraid of being found out of their collaboration with Russia and China that they wouldn't dare do that final step. Russia found out in 1999 when Boris Yeltsin had his last meeting with Bill Clinton. Boris Yeltsin said, Bill, I still believe in you despite the ways you've failed us. You just have to do one thing. You have to give Europe to Russia. And this is in a declassified transcript of the meeting in the Clinton archive.
Oh, I lost you there a second, Jeff. I lost your audio.
Classified in 20.
Go back to the where it was in a declassified meeting. Your audio dropped out after saying it was in a declassified briefing in the Clinton archive. We lost you.
Yeah, it was the last meeting, formal meeting, face to face between Boris Yeltsin and Bill Clinton, and the transcript of the meeting was classified until 2018. And for some reason, it was declassified. And what happened was, in that, if you go and read it, Boris Yeltsin tells Bill Clinton,
It did it again. As soon as you say Boris Yeltsin, it drops out. I'm not real sure what's going on. Maybe the NSA doesn't want you announcing that. But as soon as you said Boris Yeltsin, we lost you.
Bill Clinton says, I can't do that. The best internet supposedly that you can have. Maybe we should start over. I'm going to reboot my router, maybe. You think I can do that and we can start over? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I'll stay here and wait for you. You do whatever you think you need to
I'm
do.
going to reboot the router because I think that's going to clear up the problem because I shouldn't be having a problem.
Yep. I'll stay here. All right, folks, we will wait for him to come back. Again, this is Jeff Nyquist. He is a famous writer, author, researcher, lots of experience in Russian and what the Russians are doing. But in fact, Chinese military weapons of mass destruction, has a very, very long resume of his experience, diverse knowledge and background, an excellent person to interview. That's why I was so much looking forward to doing this interview with Jeff here. He's, like I said, he's rebooting his router there, and as soon as he comes back, we will have a look-see. The NSA is capable of doing a lot of things. So we'll see here. That's the KLW World News HFGCS, High Frequency Global Communication System, there in the background. So appreciate you guys joining us here this afternoon. So yeah, I will get him to list off some of his books that he has written here. As soon as we get him back, his router is booting back up, and then once his router boots back up, that should just take just a couple of minutes. We'll ask him that when he comes back, and then we'll do a question and answer session here a little later on. So I've been looking forward to this. We've been talking about this for some time, doing this broadcast. And it should be pretty entertaining and highly, highly informative. It's not very often that you get to speak with somebody who has the caliber of knowledge that Jeff has. So it appears as though Jeff is back, but I'm not seeing him yet. So it may take him a moment to get here. Still don't have his video back, but hopefully he'll get that worked out here in just a moment. There he is. And we're on the statue, not him, but that's okay. And as soon as he can get his camera hooked up, we'll be in business. I'm still talking so that he can, yep, there we go. Look at, oh, wow, what a difference. Holy mackerel, that's what it was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's something jammed up on that thing. It needed to be. So, anyway, I hope it's working okay. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, and for some reason it says it keeps turning your video off to save bandwidth. I'm not sure what's going on there, but it was awesome when you first came on. So keep going.
Maybe I the video off, maybe.
Yeah, that's fine. Just do that. And what I'll do is I'll just keep the map up and we can talk about that, and I'll switch that out here.
Yeah. Okay.
So while you
I'll
were
turn the camera on.
out rebooting, some of my followers here, I've got a couple hundred people in here already. They wanted to know about some of the books and things that you had written, so as they could get some good reading from you. Would you mind listing off a couple of books, or anything that you think is relevant or worth reading?
Well, the first book that I wrote, which I worked on starting before the collapse of the Soviet Union, was
Wow, we lost your audio again.
World War, defector literature. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I got you now. I'm almost tempted to leave the Jitsi up, mute your microphone, and then we just carry this on over a phone call. If it keeps cutting out.
Yeah, but I don't know why this is happening. This has been happening to me pretty steadily. Why don't I reboot my computer?
Well, you're welcome to do that. List the names of the books off first.
Okay, Origins of the Fourth World War, the Lies We Believe in, The Fool and His Enemy is probably the best one to start with, and of course, Red Jihad and Back from the Dead: Return of the Evil Empire. Those are some books that you should try. The first one I started writing before the end of the Cold War, before the fall of the Berlin Wall. I knew this was going to happen. That's why I started writing it, because it was in the defector literature. And everyone dismissed the defectors, saying, oh, you can't trust them, they're traitors, which is ridiculous. They've changed from the bad side to the good side. What do you mean they're not trustworthy? And there was a lot of valuable information in several of the key defectors. Their past writings looked like prophecy. Almost all the things, the most outlandish things in their books have come true. And that can't be unless they were reporting real strategic insights from inside. And that's the only thing that could be the case.
Sweet. All right. Well, I will wait for you to reboot. And while we're waiting for that, I'm going to go over and talk about a few of the military bases in Belarus to fill the time until you get back. So go ahead and reboot. We'll be here waiting on you.
All right.
Thank you, sir.
All right.
All right, folks. So the first place we're going to talk about here is just south of Brest. This is on the border with Poland. Over here is Poland. Here is a training area just south of Brest, and there have been a massive amount of upgrades and modifications made to this facility. They now have a driving track for tracked and wheeled vehicles. They also have ditches, obstacles to drive their tanks across, to show the operators how to operate the vehicles over ditches and so on and so forth. And you'll notice that they have different colored lanes here: red, blue, white, green. They do it that way so as that they can have people here from different languages. It doesn't matter if you have Koreans here. It doesn't matter if you have people from Africa, China, whatever. It doesn't matter what language. They all know the color. And in knowing that, when they bring a vehicle over there to drive, which those vehicles are on this parking lot over here normally. Well, I'm not seeing them there today. But normally the vehicles are parked. Wait a minute, might be wrong parking lot. I thought it was that parking lot. Well, they're not there today on this particular image, but normally they keep the vehicles lined up right here that they use on that driver training area. So, all right, we got you back there, Jeff. Good to see you, sir. Let's try this again.
All right, good to see you. All right, I'm going back. We're going to try this again. Okay, it's important to understand the frame.
Yeah, I lost your audio again. There's something crazy going on. I've never had this much problem. Can you hear me?
Problem they had was the communist agents in the West that they had cultivated over many years were not willing to hand the West over because it would mean they're dead. So you have this event that's recorded in the Clinton Library. People can go there. It's the last conversation between Clinton and Boris Yeltsin in December 1999. The transcript was declassified in 2018, where Boris Yeltsin asks Bill Clinton, Bill, I still believe in you. We just need one thing. Give Europe to Russia. And when Bill Clinton said, I can't do that, Boris Yeltsin basically said, well, there's a new sheriff in town, and his name is Vladimir Putin. And it's a very interesting document. They could not get, that you can't get people on the left to do the final surrender because they know their own bodyguards will kill them. This is what happened to Yanukovych in Ukraine. His own bodyguards, he was going to invite the Russian army in to put down the quote-unquote unrest, the Euromaidan revolution, and his own bodyguard said, we can't protect you. And then he ran for it like all the other major leaders. They were all stooges of Russia. The Party of Regions and President Yanukovych, they were all stooges of Russia. Many of the Western countries, by the way, are led by Chinese or Russian stooges. Infiltrating the political system has been the strategy of Russia and China for decades. We have open societies. Anybody can be a traitor. Anybody can be paid under the table. Anybody can believe in communism or socialism or whatever, and they can join that club. Once you get in that club, you can't get out. It's not easy. It's like joining the mafia. The biggest mafia in the world is the communist movement. And the communist movement isn't the goody-goody religion that all the rank and file communists believe. Oh, we're going to make a better world. No, it's the Beijing and Moscow center, and it's their military and intelligence apparatus, and that they're going to own the world. And as I said before, as Lunev said, they want to destroy the United States. The secret speech of Chiao Chen, defense minister of China, 24 years ago, he said, it's a tragedy, but we have to exterminate the Americans and make a second China in the lower 48 states. And you can look this up online. This speech was smuggled out of China about 20 years ago, and it was translated into English. And it is a very scary speech. So now, how do you get the Western alliance to break up and the U.S. to be isolated and prepared for the slaughter? You have to have an American leader that stupidly will dissolve the Western alliance and imagine that he can side with Russia against China in order to, save America. But what he's really doing is destroying it. It's destroying the whole West. He's basically handing Europe over to Russia, and the Chinese in the meanwhile are going up to the past week and saying, you can see the Americans are going to not defend you. You better make a deal with China now. You might as well join the winning side now. See, this is what's going on right now. Europe's in a panic, and you had that 7 minutes, those 7 disgraceful minutes, the most disgraceful minutes in American diplomatic history, in the Oval Office on Friday, all these Republicans saying Zelensky is some kind of villain for that meeting, when Zelensky was a deer in the headlights. And I'll explain that in a minute. That meeting was a planned ambush. Zelensky thought something different was going to come when he was a guest over here. And next thing you know, he finds out he's not going to be in a meeting to negotiate or present anything. He's being dumped. He's going to supposedly sign something. He's being dumped in the Oval Office. And the first question out of the box is, why aren't you dressed in a suit? Why do you look so bad dressed the way you are? Right? That's the first question. By the way, Trump winked at the guy before he asked the question. So on top of the guy being jet lagged, on top of the fact that he's angry because the meetings are not as represented, he's now in the middle of cameras. He's in front of the whole world, and he's being insulted by the first question. And Trump is winking at the questioner. Then the next thing you know, the vice president, who never in these meetings these are two heads of state meeting. Never in the history of these meetings does the vice president interject to browbeat the head of state of another country. You know, a head of state is a special person. He's not just a normal person. A head of state represents his entire nation. So here's Zelensky. He's not just him. He's a nation, right? Just like Trump is. And he's being browbeaten by the vice president who's telling him 3 times, it's browbeating if it's 3 times, that he's disrespectful because he made the statement that Putin cannot be trusted, that he broke 25 ceasefires, and that, you know, I just want you to understand this. And this is the thing that's so destructive to the relationship, is that why did the vice president do this? They've been trying to make Zelensky angry. Why are they trying to make Zelensky angry? There's a script in this meeting. Not only are they saying Zelensky's disrespectful in the meeting, they're saying that he's unthankful. You've got to say thank you. You haven't said thank you enough. This guy's gone around the world saying thank you to everybody. That's been his job, and he's done it. You could see it. Somebody made a clip of all of his saying thank yous. It like runs for 25 minutes. I mean, it was unbelievable. And then Zelensky tried to get a word in edgewise. They're talking over him. I thought I was invited here to speak. You know, Mr. President, God forbid, or he said, actually, God bless, that you are in a war, you know, but this can come to you. This war can come to you. Your country can be bombed and invaded too. And what is Trump's reaction? You don't know that. You don't know that. And, well, you might feel differently. No, you don't tell us how we feel. And Trump says, don't dictate to us what we feel. Well, he's just trying to warn us. He's a representative of a nation that's being bombed and attacked by our enemy, which is Russia, by the way. The Russians actually say this. Vladimir Putin and all of the leaders in Russia say they're not at war with Ukraine. Ukraine is a nothing. They're at war with the United States. Ukraine is just a proxy. In fact, these stupid right-wing commentators are always saying, and the stupid left-wing commentators will say, they're always saying that this is a proxy war. No, it's not. Ukraine is being invaded. Nobody else. Ukraine is not a proxy for anyone else. It's trying to survive. They want their freedom. They want to be free from Moscow. And they've asked for help, and people have given them help. Not enough, just enough to keep them on the map, but not enough to win. And by the way, Biden didn't really give good support to Ukraine. This is one thing that you would think that Trump would welcome, that Zelensky pointed out. They didn't give us all this money. So Trump, in that meeting, he lies. He tells a whole bunch of lies. First lie, he says that, well, I can't say anything negative about Mr. Putin because I have to be a mediator. I can't say anything negative. And yet, there he is degrading the president of Ukraine. Not only did he not be neutral, but the United States voted with North Korea and Russia on the UN resolution about whether Russia was wrong to invade Ukraine. We voted with Russia and North Korea. That's not neutral. Even communist China abstained from that vote. I mean, abstaining is neutral. Voting with the Russians and the North Koreans is not neutral. And then asking President Zelensky to resign, and not asking President Putin to resign, and calling Zelensky a dictator and not calling Putin a dictator. You see, Trump is not behaving as a neutral intermediary. He's hammering Ukraine. He is attacking Ukraine while pretending to be a neutral moderator. That's a lie. That's deceptive. His sycophants will repeat his lies. And then he says that the United States has given $350 billion to Ukraine. Whatever the numbers are, the official numbers are like 180 something billion, but really Ukraine has only received about 100 billion, 100 and something billion, 103, 4 billion. And Zelensky tries to explain that. When Macron was in the White House earlier last week, he actually touched Trump on the sleeve, you know, like, no, America has not given more to Ukraine than Europe. And it's a fact. It's just a fact. And the Ukrainians know it. America as one country has given the most share, of course, because we're the biggest. But overall, Europe has given more. But Trump insists on these lies, just like he said Zelensky's popularity ratings are only 4%. Well, they were over 50% before Trump started attacking him. When Trump called him a dictator, it went up to over 57%. Now that he's back in Ukraine, having stood up for the Ukrainian people in front of the world under those attacks, his popularity's got to be over 60, probably 65, 70% now, because the Ukrainians are really angry.
Last poll I saw was 74%.
That is, okay, I hadn't seen that one. That is what you would expect. What Trump really, why did Trump do this? Because the mineral deal was never going to be signed. I submit, my analysis is that Trump never intended for this mineral deal with Ukraine to go through. And he had to stage, and the evidence that this was a staged assault on Mr. Zelensky, a staged affront to him, a provocation, is the way that the narrative went. You're disrespectful, okay? I studied the transcript. I made a transcript of that whole meeting. Zelensky was never disrespectful. And he was, at the end, he was arguing to defend his country, because if, as a person representing 45 million Ukrainians worldwide, he was obligated to defend them. He couldn't just look down at the floor at his feet and take a beating, because he would have had to resign as president of that country if he had done that. No, he had to stand up. He stands for 45 million people. All those people and the 45,000 Ukrainian dead were under attack. Their honor was under attack. He had to try to argue. And his arguments were very civilized and very calm and very kind, because he was saying, I'm trying to warn you. I'm trying to explain to you. I'm being honest. I'm telling you what I think. And, in the end, President Trump says, he talks over him. He won't let him. You've talked enough. This is the President of the United States speaking to the President of Ukraine. You've talked enough. Shut up, in other words. And the Vice President of the United States, not a head of state, below the rank of Zelensky, trying to put him in his place, talking over him, telling me he's disrespectful, saying, have you ever said thanks? I mean, you know how it's not just ungracious. It's a browbeating from the both of them, from both the president and vice president. And the fact that they maintain this idea, then Trump blamed Zelensky for trying to start World War III. How dare you defend your country? You're putting all of us at risk. You need to make peace now. This was calculated because Lindsey Graham comes out, previously a supporter of Ukraine. He comes out and Lindsey Graham says, this is so shameful. Zelensky behaved so disrespectfully in the Oval Office. This was prearranged. The fact is that they were trying to get Zelensky to lose his temper. He was jet lagged. He was insulted by discovering that the meetings weren't as advertised. Then the first question is about how he dresses. Then he gets browbeaten during the meeting. Now Zelensky is a professional entertainer. He's a comedian. He knows how to control himself in front of an audience. You could tell he was struggling. He was frustrated. He was baffled. He was upset. You could see it on his face, the upset and the puzzlement. But he maintained his calm and his cool, and he defended with great dignity, I thought, and I watched it multiple times. But they had this narrative that he was disrespectful because they thought that he was going to blow his top. They thought they were putting him under such indignities that he would. And then they could turn it around and say, see how bad he behaved? See, they would provoke him into behaving worse than they did, get him to blow up. And he didn't do it. But because that was the script, they had to maintain that he was disrespectful to the end. And that was what justified Trump kicking him out of the White House and sending Zelensky on his way, nothing being signed. You see, it was all for show, because 2 weeks ago, Trump asked Zelensky to leave the White House, leave the presidency. And Zelensky is like, no, the president of the United States doesn't decide this. First of all, the opposition does not want an election. The people that might win an election don't want one. The Ukrainian people and the army don't want an election right now. And almost half the people of Ukraine are outside the country or under occupation. You can't have an election under those circumstances. And they're within the constitution of Ukraine, which says if the country's in a war like this, elections can be suspended. So there's no dictatorship. Zelensky's elected and he's governing Ukraine under the constitution. And by the way, he won his election with a greater majority than Trump ever won an election. So this is outrageous on so many levels. And what it shows is what was revealed by Marco Rubio. Marco Rubio did an interview. This is this American Secretary of State with Fox News. And he's a very verbose person. And he made a slip up. And most people miss it. But if you listen to that, in the first half of that interview, he says, well, look, if this war goes on another year, Russia's going to lose. And we can't allow that. He actually says that in the interview. Marco Rubio. And it's like, you want to stop him and say, wait a minute, Secretary of State Marco Rubio, why do we have to stop Russia from losing the war in a year? And it's all about the boys, the beautiful boys, they're going to die. This is really interesting, isn't it? Because Russia's economy is in trouble because of Europe's not buying their gas. And they've got money problems and structural problems. And the Chinese support for Russia is inadequate to what they would be getting from Europe. The product just isn't as good. And the Russia's having strikes now. So the whole thing's starting to break down. And there is Marco Rubio admitting, well, we're rescuing Vladimir Putin. Why? Well, here's what everybody in the administration is being told. And it's, you go to Michael Anton, who's running the policy planning of the State Department. They believe that Russia and China, that this war has driven Russia into China's arms, which is nonsense. Read the defector testimony. Colonel Stanislav Lunev says they were in each other's arms 34 years ago when they started to deal together and made an alliance that we know nothing about. But listen to the defector. They think that Russia and China are in an alliance, and we can divide that alliance by sacrificing Ukraine to Russia. But there are secret Chinese documents which say that this is a deception. Russia will go along with Trump and pretend to be Trump's friend against China, but Russia's really China's friend, and Trump will be deceived and America will be destroyed. And the final battle in the Chinese document will be engaged, and of course, Beijing and Moscow will win. So that's the situation we're in. We've got a government of real dummies, and it's infiltrated. They can't, even dummies can't arrive at such a perfectly inverted strategy to destroy, to blow themselves up without being, shall we say, schooled in certain narratives that will help them blow themselves up. Of course, the only people to school them in those narratives are Russian agents, Chinese agents. And the Chinese paper, according to Mr. Wing of Luda Media, the Chinese documents indicate that Trump is surrounded by Chinese agents, and I would assume that's Russian agents too, and that these will make sure that nobody is able to tell Trump otherwise, and that they can destroy anyone who tries to open Trump's eyes to what's really going on. Of course, there's been a couple of former Soviet intelligence officials, one's a KGB, another is a GRU, saying that Trump was recruited by the KGB in 1978 through his Czech wife, that he was under some kind of compromise or something, and that he tried to break free at the end of the Cold War, brought him back, and that Trump is a billionaire because of the help he's received from secret communist structures in the West. That's what the allegation is. You know, I wouldn't even entertain it, except that Trump is acting exactly as a Russian asset would act. So there's the analysis of that event. And of course, Europe is talking about going to China for help. and of course, Germany's saying we have to be independent from the United States. This could be the end of NATO. And it's in this context that this military exercise is being set up by Russia in Belarus. It's called Zapad 2025, West 2025, to translate the Russian. And it's a large number of Russian troops and Belarusian troops in an exercise near the border of Poland and Lithuania. And of course, it was a large military exercise that preceded the invasion of Ukraine. So I think we might be seeing in September, with this Zapad 2025, an invasion of the Baltic states or Poland or the Slovakia Gap to connect Kaliningrad to Russia as an excuse, but effectively cutting the Baltic states off from overland supply, forcing them back into the Soviet Union, which, of course, a year ago, November, Russia officially announced re-Sovietization. So get ready, Central Asia. Get ready, Baltic states. Get ready, Azerbaijan and Georgia. By the way, many of these countries are controlled by KGB assets anyway. So they're all going to be brought back into the Union. The Soviet Union, I think, is going to be reconstituted. That's what it looks like. And that shouldn't be a surprise because Russia has not only allied with China, there's not only communist North Korean troops fighting side by side with the Russians against Ukraine, but there are Russian troops in communist Venezuela. Russia's giving enormous grain shipments to communist Cuba. There are Russian advisors and construction people in Nicaragua building infrastructure. And the Russians are all over Africa, as well as the Chinese. And it's African socialist regimes. This is the communist bloc. It never went away.
Well, a couple things I wanted to throw in here. First off, I actually think Trump was trying to get the mineral rights, even if he did bash Zelensky. I think that he had the document there and he wanted to get him. And when you listen to Trump's comments, Trump says, we'll protect the mineral rights. We'll have people there digging them. We'll protect that area. And my point was, it'll be just like U.S. forces in Syria. They protect the oil field, not the people. Trump never once said that U.S. forces on the ground in Ukraine would protect Ukrainian people. Not once did he say that during the entire meeting. But he did say that they would protect the mineral rights. And he did say that they would protect the mineral mines. And he did say that they would protect the people that were working in the mines.
Well, of course, that's nonsense. Zelensky in the meeting, of course, that's nonsense. Zelensky in the meeting actually made this point that there were Americans and American companies in Ukraine when the Russian troops came in. And the Russian troops just waved over those American workers and American businesses. So this has already happened. There were American businesses in Ukraine when Russia invaded. And it didn't stop anything. Zelensky was asking for, he says, well, what we really need is security guarantees. You know, and this is why he's pointing to Putin breaking 25 ceasefires. So the Americans come in to get the mineral rights and the Russians invade anyway. You know,
right. And then you know, what I couldn't get over was Trump saying that he knew that Putin would stop fighting. And then J.D. Vance saying that, you know, we need to come to a political resolution and political negotiations. And that's when Zelensky said, well, you know, what type of politics are you talking about? You know, Putin has signed 25 times and violated it every time. And what I really want to do is I want to back up to 1993, 1994. And let's start with the Budapest Memorandum and security guarantees and how the U.S., the U.K., and Russia screwed Ukraine over because of that, and how that should have a bad taste in the mouths of every Ukrainian now because we didn't provide those security guarantees. When Ukraine was invaded in 2014, the only thing Obama sent was blankets with holes in them. And they were begging for U.S. support. That's why I started supporting Ukraine in June of 2014 and actually traveled to Ukraine in 2015, specifically starting in January, to train Ukrainian special forces, to train Ukrainian SEALs, and to provide them with the latest and greatest in technology, holographic sights, night visions, thermal imagers, drone technology, radio direction finding. A lot of the technology that they have evolved today, I've been supporting them for the last 11 years to bring to the battlefield. So let's go back and give us the history and your rundown of the Budapest Memorandum with President Clinton, the leader of the UK and Russia, if you would, please.
Yeah, well, I just one comment about whether Trump wanted to sign that deal. after the exchange in the Oval Office, Trump could have easily just gone over and said, well, we'll cancel the press conference, but we'll just sign the treaty. It was actually Trump's decision to kick Zelensky out. And it wasn't Zelensky's. Zelensky didn't walk away from signing the deal. Trump kicked him out. So that's an important point. And he kicked him out and said he can come back when he apologizes. So that was an interesting, because of course, I think the main goal is to cause Zelensky to resign, because Zelensky is a strong defender of his country. Remember, Joe Biden offered him a plane ride or a helicopter ride out of Kiev when everyone thought the city would fall in 3 days. And he said, I don't want to ride, President Biden. I want ammunition and weapons. But to answer your question about the Budapest memorandum,
well,
yes.
Before we go there, but you need a key thing that Zelensky said in the meeting with Trump, because I've played it a dozen times for my followers. He said that, what kind of agreement can this be? How can we sign away the mineral rights with no security? How could you make one deal without the other? Because Trump didn't want to do anything for security guarantee. He just wanted a mineral deal, saying you got to have the mineral deal first, then we can deal with security.
Well, Zelensky didn't actually say he didn't want to sign that agreement, because he just said he wants security guarantees. But
right, that's what I'm saying. He wanted security guarantees to go along with it, and Trump wasn't offering any.
Yeah, but no, he wanted to sign the deal. He wouldn't have come if he didn't want to sign the deal. He wanted to sign the deal because he was hoping he could get the security guarantees later. Now, when he came there, he thought he was going to have a meeting where he was going to be given the security details, but he wasn't. And that put him in that. I think that was intentional to put him in this bad mood. The thing is the Ukrainians would have signed that deal whether there were guarantees or not, because it was the best chance to get guarantees in the future, because after all, this is how their country is going to be built. But he wanted to make the case for the security guarantees as being part of it, because the Russians could not be trusted. This was turned into something it wasn't by the administration.
But to me, it looks like, and knowing Trump and people that know Trump and people who do business with Trump, it looks to me like Trump was just a bait and switch. He was offering the security guarantees with it, and then when he got here, this was the only deal he was being given.
Right. And then, of course, Zelensky's disappointed. But look, if you're Ukrainian, why wouldn't you take this deal? It was a good deal for Ukraine with the way they negotiated it. It was a good deal. I mean, if you don't get security guarantees, then you don't have to worry about it. But so the security guarantees were the Ukrainians would want the mineral deal. But what they really wanted was a guarantee of survival, and of course, the mineral deal is good. Well,
right, if we survive, there's nothing wrong with the mineral deal. But this is the way I look at it, and this is the way I think Zelensky looks at it, and Ukrainians look at it. Great, you have a mineral deal with us. Now, what stops the United States from providing us with weapons? Because they could stop right then and let Russia roll over them, and the U.S. still has the mineral deals.
No, there was no because they have a mineral deal with Russia.
It wasn't with Russia; it was with with Ukraine. But what I'm saying, is, if Trump has a deal with Putin backstage. Yeah. Because Trump has been talking with Putin. Trump has talked great about Putin.
Yeah, I'm absolutely, this is what I'm saying. I'm absolutely certain that Trump has a back deal with the Russians. And I will tell you, I spoke with one of Putin's friends on Inauguration Day. And he told me, it's all arranged. Trump is going to surrender Ukraine. He's going to force Zelensky to go into exile. And then they're going to basically have elections. And they're going to have basically a pro-Russian government in Kiev, and that the Russia's going to win the war. That's what he told me. Now, I didn't believe him. I thought, well, that could be true, but it's pretty harsh, I thought. Well, then Mr. Wang came along with information from China saying, yeah, the Chinese intelligence know the same story. And then I talked to somebody who worked for the head of the SBU in Ukraine, and he said, well, we heard that Trump was talking to the Russians in November after the election, and that this was all being set up. So, from 3 sources, I think that Trump has a deal with the Russians. And I think the Ukrainians know it, of course. That's why Zelensky, look, if you ask me to sign a tic-tac-toe agreement and I don't even play tic-tac-toe and I get a chance to come over to your country and present my case, I'm going to go over and sign the tic-tac-toe agreement. I'm going to go over and sign it because at least there's a bit of a hook there for the Americans to defend me. But there's no reason for me to walk out on that deal. Trump had no intention of signing that deal because he has a deal with Russia already. In fact, Putin has already offered Ukrainian resources to Trump. He's already offered it publicly.
Yes, I saw that. Putin is already offering the U.S. minerals that are in Ukraine. I saw that.
And what Trump said to Zelensky is, you don't have any cards. And of course, Zelensky said, well, I'm not playing cards. He says, yeah, no, you don't have any cards. In other words, you got to shut up and sit down. It's very much like the Melian dialogue. Trump is acting like an Athenian demagogue during the Peloponnesian War, telling all the little city-states in the Aegean to sit down and shut up and do what they say. And if that city-state happens to be a colony of Sparta, well, they're going to have to join Athens despite their ethnic commitment to their mother country. In the case of Melius, the Athenians said, look, the strong do what they want and the weak do what they must. So you have to surrender and follow our dictate. Otherwise, we're just going to exterminate you. And of course, Athens did destroy Milos. And of course, this is the argument the Russian Alexander Dugin, the Eurasianists, have been making, that Russia is Sparta and America is Athens. It's thalaccracy versus tellurocracy, and that this awful demagogue, this awful demagogic system of America, this mercantile empire is really decrepit and awful and ruthless, and they will throw their allies under the bus. So you better join with Russia and you better join the Eurasian movement. So Trump is basically a walking advertisement for the ongoing Russian propaganda of the last 30 years, Eurasianism. And that is another disquieting thing. And of course, the other thing is that when Zelensky got back to Ukraine, his deputy, Mr. Yermak, said, well, why don't we have China mediate this? You know, at least China abstained in the UN in the vote against us, in the vote. And so it's all very dismaying because now Europe and Ukraine are being pushed into the arms of a smiling, grinning panda bear. You know, you've got the Russian bear and bear. And the thing is the bears are working together. And it's a scissors strategy. They're dividing and conquering the West. And Trump is their cat's paw. He's the guy that's facilitating it. And why would anybody do that? Because Trump thinks he's being a hero. He's dividing Russia from China. Russia and China cannot be divided. This will effectively divide our own allies from each other. Will destroy our alliance with Europe and ultimately with Japan too. So your thing about the Budapest Memorandum, yes, there is a thing called the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. Russia and America and Britain, all the nuclear powers are signatories to it. And it basically, as an addendum to that treaty to prevent nuclear proliferation here, when the Soviet Union broke up, Kazakhstan and Ukraine became nuclear powers because they had part of the Soviet nuclear arsenal. So the deal was Ukraine would give up its nuclear arsenal, inherited from the Soviet Union. And of course, those nuclear weapons were actually returned to Russia. It would give up those nuclear weapons in exchange for a guarantee by Britain, the United States, and Russia to respect Ukraine's sovereignty, respect its borders, which, by the way, Russia, when it invaded and annexed Crimea and invaded Donbass in 2014, violated the Non-Proliferation Treaty, the 1994 Budapest Memorandum to that treaty, violated it. It was illegal. And of course, after the full-on invasion of Ukraine, someone asked Sergei Lavrov, the Russian foreign minister, well, haven't you violated it now? You know, because the Russians denied that it was their troops invading Donbass, and it was the little green men in Crimea. Remember, it was just Crimea just decided they wanted to join Russia. Well, Sergei Lavrov said, well, the treaty doesn't really mean that we can't attack Ukraine or violate its sovereignty. The treaty just means we can't use nuclear weapons on them, right? I mean, but that's not, you read the treaty, that's not what it says. So the Russians will change the meaning. Remember how depends on what the meaning of the word "the" is, or whatever. What was it Clinton had? No, is. Depends on what the meaning of the word "is" means, right? So this is completely deceptive, this whole thing. And the Russians, it's not only an act of aggression, it's against the UN Charter to invade Ukraine, which, by the way, Moscow claims is not a real country. It's also against the Budapest Memorandum, and I think there's another treaty they violated by doing this.
And China, to give China bonus points here towards Ukraine, China still refuses to acknowledge that Crimea is part of Russia.
Yes, well, the Chinese, I think, have preserved this position on purpose because China has tried to get into Ukraine economically, and China, of course, wants grain. You've talked about the grand solar minimum and the cooling. The Chinese and Russians know about this. This Ukraine is a grain-producing breadbasket. And I think the Chinese are looking to every single grain-producing area as gold. This is why the Chinese told the Russians when they were messing around with the biggest nuclear power plant in Europe near Zaporozhye, that they said, no, don't you play with that.
And also, Odessa will be the only port that Russia would have because they can't use anything in the Azov Sea. It freezes over.
Yeah, well, there's Sevastopol too, and there's Batumi.
Yeah. Correct. Yes, there's
the Azov Sea, it was freezing over in the 1940s. It is because of all the fresh water from the Don. There's a tendency of the Azov, but yes, it's a lot of these ports will be closed, and Odessa is a warm water port. It's a fairly big one, and it's a hub. It's a rail hub. Which is
that's why I was pointing that out. That they already have the one, but I was talking about they wanted Odessa so as that they could get the grain out and have that as a main port coming in to the lower part of Ukraine. That's why they've cut across the bottom like they have, still trying to get there. In fact, they just hit a ship there, actually two ships there overnight. I don't know if you saw that.
Yeah, there's constant battling there. And there's other, like there's Batumi and there's Novorossiysk. There's other ports, warm water ports in the Black Sea. But who knows how cold it's going to get, right? I mean, it's going to be a pretty cold.
Yeah, a couple degrees C colder.
Yeah, that's a lot more freezing. But yeah, so that's the Budapest Memorandum. So this is how really rotten, and of course, all of these things, as Zelensky pointed out in the meeting, look, we were invaded actually in 2014 and nobody did anything. And we were given assurances, and he talks about all the ceasefires and the negotiations that he and Poroshenko did over the course of the war in Donbass. And he said that they had the 25 breaks of the ceasefire where Putin put his name and agreed to a ceasefire, and they broke it. And he said, so this is a guy who doesn't keep his word. Of course, whenever it's convenient for the Russians, and of course, Ukraine received guarantees from Paris and from Berlin and from London that this was not going to happen, that Putin would keep his word. And, the big blowhard President Trump says, oh, they wouldn't break their word to me. Like Trump has a magic wand that Putin has to keep his word to him. Why would Putin keep his word to Trump? He thinks he probably is laughing at Trump right now.
Well, when I knew that Putin had no respect for Trump was right before the election. Putin had printed in all of the Russian news outlets photographs of his wife naked. And Trump didn't say a word about it.
That's a nice nudge, because the Russians will do this to people they have blackmail or compromat on. They will publish a lesser embarrassing thing about a person. Now, you would think that, Trump is famously, supposedly remembers every slight and is absolutely angry and does not let go of anything. He's like a borderline personality who's remembering what you did 5 years ago to him. In some little slight he's remembering. But here they put his wife up in naked pictures of his wife up on the internet. And it's like nothing to Trump. Why? Because Trump doesn't dare say boo. It's sort of like saying, remember, we have a gun pointed to your head, and this stuff on your wife is nothing compared to what we have on you. And I think that's probably true, given what we just saw. You there, Lee?
I'm sorry, I had my microphone muted. Yeah. So the facts are that, some people think that this might be Trump derangement syndrome, but all of this is provable. All of this is factual. You can go look. We actually reported when the Russians posted the naked photographs of Trump's wife in the paper. We actually showed the television shows in Russia talking about Putin posting photographs of Trump's wife naked in the newspapers. So that's not Trump derangement syndrome. That's a fact. And, people can go back and read the transcript, go back and watch the video. It was all there. It's live on the news. How can it be Trump derangement syndrome when it's actually what you can see? It's there. Go look at the documents. Go read it. There's nothing about this that is fabricated or Trump derangement syndrome. I surely don't have Trump derangement syndrome. I just report the news, whatever it is, good, bad, or ugly.
Well, there's an analysis that can be done here because the Russians have this habit of revealing small bits of embarrassing information about people that they have under pressure, as if to remind them, look, we have stuff on you. You got to be careful. And of course, I think that a lot of these guys are smart enough to know that the Russians can't reveal their full relationship because that would ruin the fact that the Russians have so many other prime ministers, presidents, and ministers in their pocket that they would set off a wave of investigations of the backgrounds of politicians all over the Western world if they revealed that they controlled one president, especially a president of the United States. So you have, remember, in the lead up to this negotiation between Boris Yeltsin and Bill Clinton in 1999, you have the Monica Lewinsky scandal. Clinton is under impeachment threat. He has got a sexual scandal in the White House involving Monica Lewinsky, and there's things coming out right and left about Clinton and women. Now, if that wasn't pressure on Clinton, I don't know what is. And what is it that allowed this pressure to be uncapped? I don't know exactly, but it's very interesting. The final move of the Russians while Clinton is under the scandal pressure is, Bill, I still believe in you, but you have to give Europe to Russia. And this is what actually Trump is delivering on. He's giving Europe to Russia. And this is quite clear.
Yeah, it surely looks that way. And when you look at and I'll put it up here so you can see it. When you look at the maps, a lot of people aren't aware of what's going on. We track military flights, military ships, military shipments, the frontline emergency or HFGCS, high frequency global communication systems. KLW World News monitors this stuff 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And if we're ever off the air, some of our members are still tracking it regardless, and they provide us with additional information if we're out of pocket. So the President Trump has suspended all ISR flights in Europe. Didn't know if you knew that. Were you aware of that?
No, I wasn't.
Yeah, so he suspended all ISR flights over Europe 48 hours ago, and we've been tracking it. And thus far, the only ISR flights that have taken place anywhere by the United States has been a Black Cat flight looking at what's going on in Syria and Israel. And Black Cat 5 is a Global Hawk aircraft that is flying surveillance over the Eastern Mediterranean for Israel and looking at targets in Syria. And then the Brio flights, which are Bombardier Challenger 650s. And the reason that the Brios are still flying is because of the fact that they're a government contractor and they have a contract to fly. And that particular program is what's called a spiral development program, of one of the things which I championed when I was a senior technologist for the U.S. Army. In fact, my laboratory came up with the term spiral development. And that's where you develop the aircraft or whatever the system is, ISR. It started with C2, command and control, and then went to C2 ISR, and then C3, and so on and so forth. In spiral development, you develop the platform, you deploy it. While you're deploying it, you find deficiencies and things of that nature that are wrong with it and things that you want to make it better. You build another one that is better than the first one you made, and you send the second one that you made out and bring the first one back, and then you modify it, and anything that you learn from the second one you add into the third one, and you just keep spiraling up and up and up to continue to improve and enhance the capability of the platform. So the company that owns the Brio aircraft, they've now been doing all of the ISR over Europe. So they have flown, and I'm going to put this up here full screen for you on one. These are the flights in and around Kaliningrad this morning that they've been doing with the Brio. And then when you look down here, Trump alluded to in the meeting about wars that people were trying to start and that he knew about and nobody else knew anything about. Well, guess what? We knew all about it. That's why Brio is flying around Croatia, Bosnia, Herzegovina, and Serbia this morning. And as you can see, Brio there, this is the flight of Brio right here. So these are the two hot spots that the U.S. is still worrying about, because if they weren't worried, actually three hot spots, including what Black Cat is doing for Israel and Syria. If these weren't the three hot spots in the world right now, Brio wouldn't be flying over and around them, and Black Cat 5 would not be down there. And we normally track 20 to 30 surveillance aircraft or surveillance flights every single day. And in the last 48 hours, there have been 3. So Trump has shut down his support, and he shut down all support to Ukraine, not even supporting the power grid restoration efforts in Ukraine. Everything going to Ukraine has been shut off.
The other thing that they did is that Mr. Hegseth, the defense secretary, announced that we are suspending all digital, that is, cyber operations involving Russia. So
correct. I forgot to mention that. He shut down cyber operations against Russia. That came out from the Secretary of Defense this morning.
Yeah. So this is a very significant change. It shows the shift towards Russia. And it's funny, we've got these really communist leaders in Europe like Keir Starmer, the British Prime Minister, and of course Macron, always a very odd character who's turned France into a kind of colony of communist China. These people are engaged in a reorganization of Europe, and it looks like they want to move Europe into the orbit of China, which of course is to go from Scylla to Charybdis, to use a Greek mythology term. They are going from one bear to another to be devoured. And the United States, the great protector, is just gone nuts and is just basically breaking up its own. The other thing is the tariffs. Great, 10% tariff on China, 25% tariff on our allies, on Europe. You put a 2.5 times higher tariff on your allies than on your enemy, China?
Yeah,
right?
and this is the thing that gets me. We already know that China, like you were alluding to and talking about before, we already know that China has been doing things against the U.S. We know that with Huawei and the surveillance of their cellular telephone system. We know of the surveillance over military bases with their balloon filled with surveillance equipment. We know that Biden let that balloon go all the way across the United States so it could continue out its mission before we shot it down. There were plenty of opportunities for that balloon to be shot down while it was over the United States, and we didn't take it.
Well, to defend General Van Herk, because I had dinner with him in Toronto when we both spoke at the Arctic Conference on the Arctic in Canada in September. General Van Herk told me that, of course, Canada had not shot the balloon down, and that once it entered into the United States, it was over people where people on the ground could be killed. And President Biden immediately ordered the balloon shot down. But General Van Herk, according to American law, the president can't give an illegal order. And it was technically an illegal order because the balloon was not an immediate threat to anyone's life. And if it had been shot down and anyone had died on the ground, General Van Herk could have been arrested and charged with murder. Besides, the fact that the balloon would crash on land would mean that it would destroy the contents of the balloon. They wanted to recover those contents, and to do that, they needed the balloon to crash into water. So they waited until it was off the East Coast, shot it down, and recovered the contents of the balloon. In the meantime, he assured me that they had camouflaged, turned off all the electronic stuff so that it could gather no intelligence as it flew over 2 of our ICBM fields, which is what its mission apparently was. So I felt great confidence meeting with General Van Herk and, of course, his deputy, General, I think his name was Peltier, the Canadian deputy commander of NORAD. And, of course, General Van Herk did this as the commander of both NORAD and NORTHCOM. And I have to say I was very impressed with General Van Herk and his explanation. So, but it is unfortunate that that we're so used to our government betraying us, we automatically assume the worst.
Well, I've got a different angle on that. So the U.S. has a balloon that's a high-altitude balloon called Combat SkySat. And it was developed in Colorado, and it has a software program that will determine where a balloon can land or will land. And that software will track the movement of the balloon, whether you punch a hole in it or what you do with it, and its rate of descent to tell you approximately where it's going to land so that the U.S. government can go and recover the classified equipment that is within the box on the bottom of a Combat SkySat. And there were plenty of areas where it was wide open, less than 1 person per 1,000 acres. Over Kansas and other parts of the United States, where the people from Combat SkySat, who I was in contact, I used to work with them, who told me that that balloon could have been shot down for days and it not come down on any populated areas whatsoever. And additionally, they could have had helicopters and other things operating in the area out there because they can detect or figure out where it's going to go down. And all they would have had to have done was shot a single hole in it and then let it deflate and start coming down. And so Combat SkySat was quite confident that that balloon could have been shot down at any time. Additionally, what the balloon was doing was it was monitoring. So you have people who have TikTok and other software like that that the Chinese have that have already been loaded onto people's phones and equipment and so on and so forth. And what they were doing is the phones, the cellular system that was on the satellite was doing what was called autonomous operations or autonomous registration. And so what it does is when it would come over the military base, it would transmit with a higher power and accept all phone calls coming into it. And anytime that a phone would link to that channel, the tower would kick out or the balloon would kick out an autonomous registration signal. That autonomous registration signal would give the name, the ID number, the ESN, the roamer information, and everything about that phone. And they were gathering that as it went across the military bases. So it didn't matter if the military base turned off their internet. It didn't matter if the military base turned off their cellular network. The cell phone, the tower system, the balloon was logging all IP addresses and everything that it flew over and it logged that and then transmitted it back to China in real time. So that's the intel I got on the balloon, and that's where I'm coming from.
Interesting. Yeah, General Van Herk said that this is different, and you could tell me if this is he said there was a 60-mile radius in which they knew the balloon would fall, and that in each opportunity to shoot it down, there were always civilians underneath it somewhere, and there was always some chance that people on the ground could get hit by debris and killed. So I don't know. This is different from what you're telling me. So,
Yeah, that is not what I was told. I was told that the likelihood of somebody being killed was as close to zero as you could get. And in fact, we actually figured out when the balloon was flying over, we were using the KLW World News Network, and you may not be familiar with the way our system works, but I'll be happy to show it to you here. So This is the KLW World News Network. These are our members around the United States. And this is their exact locations as we speak. And so when the balloon was coming across, we did two things. First, we figured out once we knew where the balloon was exactly, we went to weather radar sites in the area, because we use Radar Omega and Radar Scope as our two radars for doing severe weather alerts to our members. And so we actually tuned those so as that we could actually detect the balloon itself in flight. And so we started tracking the balloon as it came across the United States. And then what we did was, as it was coming across the United States, we would have different members go outside, and we would tell them an azimuth and an elevation to start looking in the direction to get a photograph of the balloon. And those members were actually sending us images from the balloon in real time, and we were airing them as it was coming across the United States. So according to the folks from Combat SkySat, they said it could have been shot down numerous times and not had anybody be injured from it in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah, well, I guess even if there's a 1 in 1,000 chance of someone being injured, I guess General Van Herk didn't want to take the chance.
Yeah, and technically, the only people who are allowed to shoot down anything over the United States is NORAD.
Or Northcom.
Right, Northcom. That's what I'm talking about. Northcom.
Yeah, yep. And that's what he said. In fact, he can override the president, which I was surprised. I didn't realize under law that the commander of Northcom can. He actually said things like, well, if I think a Soviet submarine or a Russian submarine off the coast is about to launch an attack, without the president's permission, I can order it sunk.
Correct.
Which I didn't know that technicality. I thought that was pretty neat.
Yeah, I found out about it when I was contacted. I'll give you a little history. Do you remember when the guy who worked for the post office in Florida flew and landed his ultralight on the White House grounds?
Yes.
Okay, so I was contracted by the Secret Service after that to come up with a system to detect drones and detect aircraft and to be able to shoot those down and out of the sky. And so I designed a system with a safety system. It tied into the radar system around Washington, D.C., which is part of the air defense system, which I'm not going to go into. But there is a very elaborate air defense system around Washington, D.C. You may be familiar with that, with all of the Avenger missile launchers at a variety of locations. Also, Patriot missile launchers. People aren't aware of that either.
Yeah. But they have to protect Washington, yes.
Correct. Yeah, and not only Washington, actually all the way up through New York. A lot of people,
all of the basing infrastructure, all the key military infrastructure,
and airports.
Naval and air is located there.
Yep, and airports. So, so it tied directly into that system. So we would be able to track anything, anywhere, anytime, and then it had safety systems. So as that if somebody tried to walk in front of the weapon system, if an aircraft tried to fly in front of it, if an aircraft was getting ready to fly behind it, and the trajectory was going to hit that aircraft. So we went through all this elaborate system. I worked for months developing the system to put together the white paper of what could be used. And it came down to the fact that the Secret Service was not authorized to shoot anything flying over the White House. And the U.S. Marshals weren't authorized, the U.S. Capitol Police. And that's when I found out about Northcom having absolute responsibility for shooting anything out of the sky. And found that there wasn't going to be somebody from Northcom sitting at the White House to authorize shooting down a drone or a ultralight or something of that nature flying to the White House. So that's when I found out. about how Northcom worked and what was going
Yeah.
on. So
It
it was
is kind of
interesting.
funny.
I
There's something archaic about the way our defenses are arranged. It's something about the 1950s almost. It's like we never did adjust from the fact that we couldn't control everything that happened in the sky.
Yeah, absolutely crazy. All right, so where do you want to go from here? You want to keep talking about this? You want to go to where do you want to go? It's your show.
Well, I was going to ask you about these Zapad exercises. You have the idea that you really seriously think that Russia is going to move on the Savaki Gap. You've told me this. And I'm interested in the Zapad 2025 exercises in September. Do you think that we're going to see a Russian attack directly on NATO countries in September coming out of this?
I first off, I don't want to say it's September. I can't give you a date. I can tell you.
That's when the exercise. That's when the exercise is.
Yeah, I can't say the exercise.
This is when they're going to have. This is when the troops are going to be assembled right there on the border. So logically, this is when it's going to happen. This is when the Ukraine invasion came off of a military exercise. So I would assume the same thing here. This is the Russian procedure.
And we already have 250,000 troops in position now.
Are they in position, or are they getting trained?
They're in position. So we're going to show. I'm going to give you
Okay. All right. That's interesting. I knew there was a couple 100,000. There's 225,000. You're including the Belarusian troops, I assume.
Yes, I'm including the Belarusian and the troops in Kaliningrad. 100,000 Belarusian that are already ready, and 150,000 troops in Kaliningrad.
Well, most of those are Belarusian troops, though, aren't they?
Yes, it's a combination, but that's why. Yeah, but the total combination is 250,000.
The Belarusian army itself is around 200,000, isn't it?
Yes, but that's not all of that is fighting troops. You've got when you look in the U.S. military, for every 4 people in the U.S. military, 1 is a fighter. 3 are logistics. Yeah. I'm talking about fighting troops who have guns ready to fight. Yeah. It's between the two. It's 150 in Kaliningrad, troops that are ready to go, and 100,000 that are in Belarus. And so we see that, and we're going to start out. We're going to work our way up. So we're going to start out down in Brest, and we're going to work our way north from Brest. So when you go down to the training area here in Brest, there's been massive improvements to this training area here. They've got more vehicles in their motor pool. They've built this new driver training area here.
Now, is that an airstrip?
Yes, sir. That is an airstrip. And by the way, from the end of this airstrip to the Polish border is 3.2 miles. And that's pointed straight at the Polish border. Additionally, what we found out is they're planning on, and we've already found out that they have enough Mi-26 helicopters, the largest helicopter in the world. They have enough Mi-26 helicopters to have 5,800 troops airborne at one time. We've also.
Well, that's how they're. By the way, that's how they're going to take Estonia and Latvia is airborne assault.
Right, and we can show you all of those bases that are going to do that as well. We've been tracking all of those troop movements. So to support this,
especially vulnerable to that kind of an attack.
Yes, especially if you do it at night.
Yes.
So what they've done is originally there was only 1 helipad here. So now they've got a helipad here. They have put 3 more helipads here. And down here, they've put in 2 more helipads. And they've all done this in the last couple years. This has been a long-term planning operation. They've also put in more maintenance pits for checking the bottom sides of their vehicles, and they have put in a fording pond. So this is to make sure that the vehicle doesn't leak. They fill these with water, and they pull armored personnel carriers down in, because it's going to be an amphibious assault across the river, which is just 2 miles away. And so they bring them in.
And that's the Bug River?
It's this river right here, yeah. Right here, Bug River.
Yeah, the Bug. Yeah, there's the Bug, yeah.
Right.
That's
So, I mean, literally, they come
area.
right down this road here, come across here, and come over here, and come right down and go right across right there.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's a simple assault. And so these.
So they are preparing to cross into Poland.
Absolutely.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. Yeah.
So here are the 3 fording ponds that they've put in to make sure that the BMPs don't sink. And then once they come in over there, then they come around over here and they go into this, and here's where they check their propulsion system to make sure that it'll propel itself through the water.
Yeah, this is the way to get Russian troops across the river easily.
Yep. And they've also cleared out up here. All of this used to be forest. They've removed all of this forest area right here. So, and then additionally, they now have more troops.
Well, there's barracks. Those
right.
Are barracks.
They've put in more barracks up here, more barracks over here, and they have even more over here.
Look at that.
And you can look at you can see all the troops on the ground right here.
Well, that looks like
this is from October.
Is that enough for a battalion? That looks like a battalion, maybe.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yeah. And then, so that's just this one training area. So when you leave this training area and you go up here and you get up to Hradna or Grodna, you have where they have put the missile site in up here. So you come up here. Now, this is the largest S-400 missile site in the world. This is an S-400 manufacturing facility. We've actually built this facility in a 3D model. We have a computer programmer named Steve. He actually builds these models for us based on satellite and other reconnaissance imagery that we get. And so this facility has been built up. This is a stockpile. There's over 250 S-400 missiles at this facility. These are stacked 3 high for all of these here. And what they've discovered is the Russians, their weakness on these S-400 sites is that they didn't have enough radars to point in all of the directions at once. Because the S-400 is a radar homing missile. They light up the target with a radar, and then the missile goes and hits it. And so if the radar is facing in one direction, then it can't hit the other 270 degrees. Okay? Mm-hmm. So what they've done is they have stacked the place full of radars. And so they've built another facility up here. And so you've got one of these clamshell radars. This is a high-resolution radar here. You've got another radar on a truck here, another radar on a truck here. You've got another clamshell radar here. There's another radar on a truck here, another radar on a truck here, another radar on a truck here, and a long-range radar array here. And this
now, the S-400 missile, what is its range 300 miles?
400 kilometers.
Right, that's
it'll
about
hit a
miles,
target 400 kilometers away. An aircraft.
That means they've got the Baltic states and the Slovakia Gap in northern Poland covered. They've got the whole region
absolutely
covered.
Well, here this is just one. Okay, so when you come over to now it's only 40 miles from here. So here, the missile base is here. Okay, now they've got another training area right up here, and we're going to go to that one here in just a second.
Well, for those that, while you're finding that, for those who don't understand, the S-400 is one of the best anti-air systems in the world, and it also has some capability to intercept missiles, although it's been proved to be not very good at that. But that system will prohibit NATO air operations within its range. That gives perfect cover against airstrikes against the Russian military invading that area.
Yeah, and
you would not want to send American fighter jets or NATO jets, NATO bombers or anything into that area because you're gonna suffer serious casualties in aircraft if you do that.
Correct, and it can also be used for ground attack, but it's not as good.
Yeah, the Russians have done that. It is kind of silly that they did that.
So you have it's 40 miles from here to Kaliningrad. And so the Belarusians have already on television have already said they have a plan for taking the northeastern corner of Poland. We've got Lyshenko saying that. We've got the commander who is at this training area up here saying that. And so this is the other training area that they've got in the area. Now, in this training area here, they've done massive amount of improvement at this facility. They've had so many troops in and out of this area here that they've killed all the grass. Additionally, down here, they've built more underground bunkers that they've got here. You can tell that they've got massive weapons in here. These are underground bunkers. There's an entrance, there's an entrance, there's an entrance. It's double chain link fence all the way around. It's cleared all the way around. And then when you get up here onto the training area itself, they've done massive improvements on this, putting in more ranges. They even have moving target ranges. You see this here? This is a rail line. And they have a berm in front of it. A train car goes down through here that's pulled back and forth with cables, and it has a pole sticking up with a cardboard silhouette of a tank. If you go to Fort Knox, Kentucky, or even down to Fort Benning now, or which is now Fort Moore, they have these moving target ranges just like this on these railroad tracks. And so they've got them all over this range. Here, 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 here. They've got more up here. They've got more of them here and more of them here. And then they've added, in addition to that, they've added more helicopter landing pads in up here. They used to just have one, and this was it. And again, these are made for Mi-26s. If you land a standard helicopter there, it doesn't even fill up this circle in there, because we land our simulator there in a simulator regularly. But not only do they have these two, they have also added over here in the training area, and they have put more in over here. So there are 4 more brand new helipads right here. And that's to launch the troops across. Now, if people go, nah, they're not stacking up to go across the border. Well, here is the border. So if you go from the border 20 miles north on this road, you will find 8 tractor trailers that are southbound coming into Belarus. If you go from this line to the south just 3 miles, you'll find 275 tractor trailers that have been lined up there for over 4 months. Now, why would there be over 275 tractor trailers? And when we first started tracking this, there were only 100 trucks. Now there's more than 100 more than that. When this first started, there were single file. Now they're 2 by 2 for 3.5 miles. And where does that end? Guess what? It ends at the road at the north end of this training area. And that's lined up to go into Lithuania. Now, that's not the only place that trucks are lined up like that. Because if you're going to take the Suwalki Gap, you need to basically take everything from the A7 south, and that would be from Vilnius south, and cover this whole area, so you've got room to maneuver and room to bring your troops in and to make a buffer zone. And so if you come up to Vilnius and you follow the highway over to Lithuania, or to Belarus again, you'll see that on the Belarus or on the Lithuanian side, there are no trucks lined up. If you come across the border into Belarus, you will see that they have built a new border defense line, which is what you're seeing right here. This is that new line that they have built, kind of like a Maginot line behind the border, and that keeps expanding by the day. Same thing goes here to the south, all the way along down through here. So this is their protective line behind the border. Then if you come down here and you look at the highway, you see a few trucks lined up here. This lot is full of trucks. And then when you get down here past this traffic circle, the side of the road, they're doing the exact same thing they did before. They are stacking up the trucks, ready to come across the border. And this isn't on both sides. It's only on this side of the border that they're lining up. And you're like, nah, Lee, it's just a traffic jam, right? Well, if it's just a traffic jam, how come these trucks have been sitting here for months? Just like that. Now you go, oh, well, that's just Belarus has a traffic problem. Well, let's go to the other side of the Suwalki Gap. Let's go over to the Kaliningrad side, where they would be coming across on the main road. So again, here is Lithuania and here is Kaliningrad. Trucks lined up on the side of the road. Are they lined up just as a traffic jam? Well, no. They're lined up, again, for miles and miles.
That is impressive. Now, when was this taken? When was this
They've been doing
taken
this
of
for
all these
6
trucks?
months, and I've got imagery. I have live imagery from a couple of cameras that we have that these trucks are still setting there. The same trucks are in the front row that have been setting in the truck front row, and every single time we get more satellite imagery, the line is longer. In fact, the line now, and it's not represented on this map, but the latest satellite imagery I got, and you can see, I mean, how many miles of trucks do you want? You know?
Yeah, that is an impressive, I mean, just if, and I don't know if my broadcast is going to pick up these pictures, I hope.
No. What I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a link to it, and you can copy it and.
Oh, that's excellent.
And
Thank you
put
for
it
that.
up.
Yeah,
And now what
I mean, for my listeners to be able to see these pictures, this is really dramatic proof that Russia is planning aggression against the Baltic states and Poland.
Absolutely. And the latest satellite imagery I have, this line of trucks continues all the way back to this town. There are trucks sitting on the side of the road in this town, so it's an additional 1.5 miles longer than it was in the last photograph that I have in this area that's from October.
And that has been continuously going on for 6 months.
6 months, been building up like this. We've been tracking it every day. So when you look at the military, oh, here, let me show you this. So this airfield right here, let's go, actually, let me go back over here to Kaliningrad. So the Russians have taken this airfield off the map. It's not even listed as an airfield anymore. Okay? Now it's just a Russian military airbase. And you can see all of the fighter jets that they're moving in. They have spent hundreds of millions of dollars lengthening and improving this runway here. In addition to that, look at the size of the fuel depot they've put in there. You don't need a fuel depot that big for an airport.
No.
These are millions of gallons per each one of these tanks. They're massive. Look at all the refueling trucks they've got over here. So
Yeah.
they've built up this air base. In addition, if you're going to take the Baltics, you need to take this spit right here.
Yeah.
Okay, and the way they can cut off shipments coming into Lithuania is to be able to cut off here. Well, the only way that the Lithuanians can get equipment over here is by ferry. There's a ferry terminal over here. Okay, well, the way to do that would be to have a couple hundred trucks and a bunch of attack helicopters, right? Well,
Oh, yeah, attack helicopters will do it.
That's right. Well, guess what they did? They took this air base up here. Oh, by the way, this is a top secret base that planes from Russia are now landing at. This is a command and control facility in Kaliningrad. This is Kaliningrad's NORAD. Right there. And so now, the other day, a Russian plane actually landed here. And there's nothing at this airfield except for this base. And they have their own generators, and it's a lot of power because they have their own high-tension lines. This is their own substation. So they're being fed by 2 different grids at that one facility. Same thing the U.S. government does on high-end military bases. But if you come up here and you look at, I can't believe I can't find this here. And by the way, here's all the new bunkers that they built. This is nuclear. And if you want to see how big these bunkers are, you see the bunkers right there? See how big that bunker is?
That's huge.
Yeah. For an example of how big it is, you come over here and you look at this bunker here. Those are S-400s on tractor trailers coming out of that bunker.
That's quite elaborate for protecting your anti-air system.
Yeah, so what I wanted to show you is there's an airfield, and I really thought I knew my way around over here better than this, that I can't find that airfield. But there is an airfield up here in this corner. Here it is. In this airfield, we've gotten satellite imagery of this airfield. So these are the counter-rotating blade naval helicopters that they use off of Russian ships. I think they call it a Ka-22 or something like that. That's what these are. These are Mi-8s. and Mi-17s all up and down through here. There are over 100 trucks parked in this giant building right here. And then what they've done is they've put in more Mi-8s over here, but over here, these are all Mi-35 attack helicopters. And the way you can
tell the logistical infrastructure for a paratroop brigade that is mounted into helicopters.
Yeah, exactly. And then they built a huge refueling facility here. There's a new refueling facility there. This is an older image. And all they have to do is simply drive across this road right up here. It's less than 100 miles, and they can go right up this spit, and they can sit right up here, and they can attack any ship that tries to come in here. Plus, they can destroy the reserves. They can be on this side here and fire missiles into all of these storage tanks over here, artillery, whatever, and blow all of this to smithereens. And the Lithuanians.
What's really interesting is they can capture it, and they can prevent NATO from reinforcing or resupplying through those areas.
Exactly.
This is a capability that prevents resupply. The Baltic states will be under siege. They'll have to give up and surrender.
Right, and they can take, we've already flown it in the simulator. The Russians can close the Suwalki Gap in 12 minutes and 38 seconds. That's all the longer it takes. 12 minutes and 38 seconds.
Well, the Polish and the Lithuanian armies, out of fear of being destroyed at the border, have pulled back, haven't they?
Well, not only that, if you launch, we did it with 20 Mi-24 helicopters, Mi-35s, and 40 Mi-8s. Mm-hmm. That was my numbers to successfully take it and hold it until the rest of the trucks could get in. And so we could close it in 12 minutes and 38 seconds. First, I said we could do it in under an hour. Then I did more planning and said, okay, we could do it in under a half an hour. And then the last time we ran in the scenario, I said, I think we can do it in under 15 minutes. And we actually flew it in the flight simulator to all of the targets, flying to the farthest distance target. And we achieved it in 12 minutes and 38 seconds. We also calculated by trucks moving through the area to be able to reinforce it with the troops that are on the ground and all the trucks that you see. That would be less than 4 hours. So if they started the attack, and see, this is the other thing that people don't realize. In Belarus, they have 100 BMP-3s and BMP-4s that they have equipped with night vision equipment and thermal imagers.
They're planning to do the attack at night, of course.
Absolutely. The night vision and the thermal imagers on those BMP-4s and thermal weapon sights cost more than the BMP-4 does.
Now, let me ask you, do you have the positions of the Lithuanian and Polish troops at the moment?
I do, but I don't put that on the map.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah, because my understanding is that they have pulled back, and
yes.
Of course, the Lithuanian army mostly just consists of infantry. It's not, they don't have mechanized forces in any significant amount.
Right, they're going to be ran over. And so we talk about S-400 sites. So here's another S-400 site right here, just south of that, next to this quarry here. If you come down here to the south, right next to the border, there's another S-400 site down here. If you go over to the east side over here, the closest airport, and see, this is what the Russians have been doing. They have been flying transport aircraft into here, and when they get in the general area, they turn off their transponder. And then they land. Well, there's only so many places that you can land an IL-76. Okay? That you just can't put that down in the middle of a field somewhere. So what we found out is they've been landing here a lot. And what we found is they've started moving fighter jets into this facility right here.
Oh, I see the Sukhois.
Yeah. And they've built an S-400 missile site at this end of the airfield with these clamshell radars again.
Don't they?
Yeah. And then when you go to the other end of the airfield, as if one S-400 site isn't enough, there's another one. So there's 2 S-400 missile sites at this one airfield. Now this is nothing compared to what we've been tracking. If you go back over and you say, oh yeah, they want to attack across the Milwaukee Gap, well, let's go over here to the airfield in Lita, right here. Look at all of the Frogfoot Su-25s that they've moved in over here. And
yeah, that's air support for the troops.
Absolutely. And they've got the place stacked full. Every bunker is full of planes, and they've got 2 in line in front of the bunkers.
And what's interesting is that that's the perfect location because they're far enough back to reach the front.
Exactly.
But they're not vulnerable. They're not vulnerable. They're behind all those S-400s.
That's exactly right. And so, and then they have an additional S-400 site here, as well as more radars and equipment over here inside this area. And then down here, and look at, again, fuel supply, underground fuel tanks that they've put in. So they have the above ground tanks and the below ground tanks. And they've moved a bunch more trucks in, and then all of these bunkers here are full of aircraft. And they've got even more bunkers down here. So they've been stacking up equipment left and right. And then you talk about, well, what are they going to attack the ships and so on and so forth, and how are they the heavy bombers? So let me change maps here. I want to go to my Russian map here. Actually, let me go and do it this way. Hold on. Let me go into my documents because I don't have this one on their server. Let me just do airfields. Okay, so when you go into looking here at Russian airfields.
Okay.
So you go
Well,
up here.
you're all of these are just airfields. We're not seeing exactly what kind of airfields.
Oh, I'm going to show you I'm going to show you the buildup of the aircraft.
Oh, okay.
Okay. So
Yeah.
you talk about fighter jets being moved in for the attack.
Mm-hmm.
So this airfield is full of fighter bombers. Now again,
Yeah, I can see them. Yeah.
fuel. Here's helicopters, transport planes. Look at all the fighter bombers over here. Look at
my
all the
gosh.
fighter bombers here. And then
See
when you go up the
there.
taxiway, look at this.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh.
Okay.
That looks like an air regiment right there.
It's yeah, you wouldn't believe. Okay, so you got all the, and you got even got more up here, and these bunkers are full.
If this whole system is an air division, this is
Yes. And they've
It's
even
an air
got
raid.
aircraft over here on scramble. They've put in more radars over here, and they have been filling these warehouses down here on the south side of the airfield. They've been filling these warehouses over here with munitions. And we're watching the flights coming in and
It
out.
looks like there's 100 planes in that complex.
There is.
Yeah.
There is. And then you come.
That's what an air wing is about 100 planes.
And then you come, that's that one. And then if you come up here.
Now we're looking up, for those if people can't see the map, we're looking up at the north end of the Finnish border.
Yes. So then you
This is
come
what
here
the
to this.
Scandinavians, the Nordic countries have to fear is that this buildup, this implies that they're building up, is this imply they're building up against Finland?
Yes. And so then when you look at this airfield, you will see that it is stacked up with aircraft here.
Oh, yeah.
Look at all of them here on the tarmac here, all of them all the way through here. And look, if you have a bunker, you don't leave your planes on the tarmac.
Right.
Okay, so
That
everything
means,
you
that
see.
means the bunker, what you're saying is the bunkers are full and they've got more planes than they can put in the bunkers.
Exactly. And so this is just what you've got here in fighter support for the bombers. Now, when you go to the bombers, you go up here to this airfield that's just north of there, and you look up here for bombers. And we have all of this mapped in 3D. So you've got your Bear bombers up here. There's an IL-76 getting ready to take off right there. And then you've got your backfire bombers. And the backfire bombers are stacked up in here like cordwood. Okay?
Well, of course, that's, Kola Peninsula. That's where a lot of strategic assets, including the submarine bases and so on, and the Northern Fleet is based just north of here. These are probably fleet support assets. If the Northern Fleet is to go along the Norwegian coast.
These are the Marine version, which are the ones that are designed for attacking ships.
Yep,
and by the way, what you're seeing here is less than half of them.
That's quite a handsome, just right there on that parking lot.
But look at
That's
it.
quite a handsome lot. Now, there's bunkers around here where more.
No. All of these are so large, these are in revetments.
I see. I can barely see. Yeah, I see. Those are bunkers. Yes, I can see them now.
They've got these parked in revetments. But the thing of it is all of the revetments are full, with the exception of these two up here. But they've still got them lined up over here, and this parking lot right here, right now, has over 25 bombers just on this one parking, one tarmac or apron.
That would be a strategic bomber regiment right there.
Yeah. And so this is just what they've been stacking up. And so I've been tracking, we have 200 locations that we track basically daily. And they're represented by these different pins.
And this buildup began 6 months ago.
Some of it began a year ago. The truck lineup began about 6 months ago, 8 months ago maybe.
So the meaning of Russia's economy being in a full war economy means they're cranking out equipment, they're training people behind in the depths of Russia, and now they're pouring out what they've trained and prepared towards the borders of NATO.
Right, and this helicopter base here, they redid the runway, and it's now loaded with Mi-35 attack helicopters. And it even has extra fuselages over here.
That's just staggering. That is a lot of military equipment. I mean, Finland, no wonder Finland is scared.
Right, and then there's another air base here. I can't remember exactly where it is now, but it's up here somewhere. Let me see if I can find it. Is this the one?
So
yeah, right here.
Okay.
So this air base here,
that
they've
road
closed.
just south of this air complex, is that the road that connects up to the main highway leading to the border of Sweden?
Yes.
It is. Okay.
And then here at this air base, what they've been doing is they've moved the aircraft out, but they've put in a lot more bunkers, or excuse me, a lot more barracks. And what they've done is they've started moving in the articulated amphibious attack vehicles. You know, the articulated, similar to the BB-206. I think they call them ATC 30s or something, or ATM 30s. They're an articulated amphibious tracked vehicle. Well, this parking lot is full of them.
Well, that's good because Finland's full of lakes and rivulets, so you're going to need to cross a lot of bodies of water.
So they've got more of them over here, and they've got more of them down here.
Wow, they know what kind of vehicles they need for that terrain, don't they?
Right, and they've been bringing them in, and then there is another base that is I wish I knew where the hell it was here. I'm not seeing it on this map. I have a pin for it. There's another airfield that belonged to the Russian Navy, or the Russian Air Force gave it up. And a company that had Antonov AN-12 transport aircrafts took it over to fly cargo in and out. 2 years ago, the Russians came in and the company declared bankruptcy, and the Russians actually just moved all of the other aircraft out of the way that were there, and they have filled that entire base with Antonov or IL-76s and 124s.
Wow.
And there's like 40 huge transport aircraft at that facility, and they have put in another one of those giant fuel supply facilities. So that's how we're being able to identify the fields that they want to use, is because of the fact that everywhere that they're building up like this, they put in one of these brand new fuel facilities. So it's kind of like the signature, and they use the same fuel facility at all of them.
It sounds like they're either planning a large airlift or they're planning a large paradrop operation somewhere in the rear of the Finnish army.
Yeah.
That's interesting. I wonder what they're trying. Yeah, it's interesting to contemplate what they would be thinking of.
But it's been very interesting watching this buildup of equipment here, and I thought it was right along in here. Let's see if I can find it. I can't remember what the name of it is. We have somebody from Sweden who's a normal viewer, and she can always.
No wonder the Swedes are and the Finns are worried and talking about storing food and getting their people ready for war. They're looking at this same intelligence.
Yes. And we have a lot of them. So on the KLW World News Network, we have a lot of members who are members of NATO. We have members who are members of the British Ministry of Defense. We have German military officials, Polish military officials. We've got folks from Estonia, folks from Sweden. We have on our private news network, we have a wide diversity of high-ranking military and government officials. I mean, we've got people from the Department of Homeland Security and others on our network. So the great part about it is it goes both ways. They get information from us, and they support us with information. And I want to go back to where we were talking about before with China.
Right.
China has actually been building transformers for the United States. And those transformers have a built-in turn-off mechanism. So as they can turn off and destroy that transformer at the exact same time, and it's irreparably destroyed. You can't rebuild it once they push that button. And Department of Homeland Security actually purchased one of these transformers, brought it into the United States, and found it, disassembled the transformer, and found this self-destruct system inside the transformer. And now the Department of Defense and Department of Homeland Security and a few other groups, how shall I say, are in a mad dash to replace all of those transformers at critical sites, because some of them were on military bases.
Yes, I think the FBI director mentioned this in April, last April. An interesting aside here, Lee, is that Mr. Wang of Luda Media has insisted that the Chinese want to fight World War III in North America, in the United States. They don't want it to be fought anywhere else. And of course, why would you need to turn off transformers unless you're going to invade the United States?
Correct.
Yeah. It'd be nice if you had similar things to watch the Chinese build up, but I'm sure you're going to see the same kind of thing in China.
We do. And
you do?
Yes. And so we have been watching the Chinese move their equipment towards. So our intelligence says that when the Chinese go to make their move on Taiwan, that they're going to attack South Korea and Japan first.
Yeah, that's what I was told, that they're going to blockade Taiwan and take the other places first.
Yeah, and then what they want to do is they want to take Taiwan without firing a shot. Yep. To take Taiwan. It's and maybe you could tell me on the Chinese proverb, it's sacrifice we to save Wei, or sacrifice Wei to save we. I can't remember which way it goes. But
we and Wei,
Yeah, so you sacrifice one to save the other. So they want to sacrifice South Korea and Japan to save Taiwan without making a shot or taking a shot on Taiwan, and that way they can take Taiwan intact. And as part of the peace agreement, China will take Taiwan without ever invading Taiwan. And so that'll be part of the Japanese, and the South Korean peace agreement for their surrender. And then also, I don't know if you know that speaking of China, China and North Korea have now granted, North Korea and Russia have now granted China the right to move troops and ships down a river to be able to come out here into the Yellow Sea. It used to be they had to have permission from both North Korea and Russia to bring ships down this river. No longer. China has been granted permission to bring any ship in and out of that river anytime they want, without having to have it approved by North Korea and without having to have it approved by Russia. And then they have moved down here along the coast 1,400 armored personnel carriers. Then the other thing that China has done is all of their vehicle transport ferries, their great big ferry ships, every single one of those that's being built now has to be built to military spec to be able to haul tanks. So every single Russian or Chinese ferry that's been built in, I think, the last 5 years has to be built to that spec for the floors inside of them to sustain the weight of them being packed with tanks. Additionally, China has built these new bascule bridges on the fronts of boats that are 500. They have a 500-foot long span that could reach out with a crane out off the front, so they can come into the shore, and these ferry boats can come up and attach to the back of that ship and just stream the tanks and armored personnel carriers onto the shore. Have you seen those?
Yeah, I've seen those.
So there's a lot going on in the world.
Well, let me ask you something, Lee, about China. Just one more thing. The Type 71 Chinese amphibious transport, I was astonished that its range was capable of reaching certain ports on the U.S. West Coast from China in a one-way trip.
Yes.
And I was astonished, since they're talking all the time about invading Taiwan. Why would they need an amphibious transport that could reach North America when they're trying to invade an island that's just a few miles off their own shore? It seems to suggest to me that their target is the United States ultimately.
They've said that they wanted the United States to be conquered prior to 2030. In fact, they have already started cutting up the United States amongst their leaders over there. They've already got deeds for property in the U.S.
You've got so you got intelligence out of China on this?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so can you share any of the details, or is it too sensitive?
I've done it on a previous show, and I would have to go back and get the details. I haven't talked about that with China probably for about 6 months, ever since this started building up over here on the Baltics.
So I was told by Colonel Stanislav Luna many years ago, and of course he passed away in May of 2020, that the whole invasion of North America is Russian missile power, Chinese manpower, and the idea is they copy the method of the German invasion of Norway. That is, they infiltrate the country first. It's an infiltration invasion. And then they surprise attack through commercial traffic ways. They bring the troops in on ships that carry, goods.
Correct.
And they have their infiltrators inside the country already with ammunition, arms, and uniforms, and to seize airfields, to seize ports, to open the country up to the main forces, the heavy weapons that will be brought later. And of course, Mr. Wang had revealed to me they had managed to get the operational language codes for each branch of the Chinese armed forces to begin the surprise attack. And they had surprise attack words for the Chinese strategic rocket forces, their nuclear missiles, which means the attack on the United States would involve nuclear weapons aimed at our Navy and our strategic deterrent.
As well as EMP, as well as taking out main transformers, as well as attacking and jamming our cellular telephone communication system, and attacking the internet. And you got to remember, who owns the DNS server now?
I don't know.
China.
Really?
Yeah. Obama gave it to him.
Having trouble.
Obama gave it to him. So all they have to do is turn off that DNS server and our grid goes down.
So much for cyber currency.
Yeah, roger that, man. That's exactly what Trump is pushing for today.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's always been a scam. Real money is gold and silver. Ladies and gentlemen, please.
Yeah. Yep. So we're being set up. The Chinese, and see, this is one of the things that people won't talk about, and I have, because I broke the story. So, do you remember the FBI went into the solar observatory in New Mexico and shut the solar observatory down? Do you remember that happened a couple years ago?
Yeah.
Well, the reason that they did that was because there was a Chinese infiltrator at that facility, and that facility overlooks an airfield at the northern part. It overlooks. Oh shoot! I've been there. There's a. Let me look on a map so I can tell you what the name of it is. I think it's Nellis Air Force Base, and I'm going to feel like such an idiot when I think of the name of it. It's in Alamogordo, New Mexico. I used to live there. Anyway, that base, and I'm bringing it up here on the map for you, White Sands Missile Range, because I used to live right up here on top of a mountain in Alamogordo. And then down here, you have the air base that's outside of the city. Why am I not seeing it on here? But anyway, that airfield, air base there, I think it's Nellis. Holloman Air Force Base, not Nellis. Holloman Air Force Base, right here. Holloman does a lot of stuff with spooky aircraft. And the solar observatory was up here at Sunspot, right here. And when you come in 3D at Sunspot, you overlook the airbase out here. And so he had an SDR receiver up here, a wideband SDR receiver, and specifically, I can show you even the building that the antenna was on because I went there. And in fact, when the FBI took the antenna down, they left the bracket on the building. And so here at Sunspot, come on. Here at Sunspot, this is the building that the antenna was mounted on. Right here. Oh. Right there. That building right there is what the antenna was mounted on and had the SDR receiver. And that SDR receiver was sending everything that it picked up straight to China. And when they did a packet sniffer and found out this, it was coming out of Sunspot and where it was going, that's when the FBI went in and raided the place. And that was the reason that Sunspot was shut down, is because of the antennas on this right here, and the Chinese supposedly astronomer that was working there that was actually not doing astronomy. he was using this building right here to be able to monitor all of the aircraft that were flying back and forth out here on the range. And he was getting telemetry off of our missiles, telemetry off of all of the aircraft, all of the radio traffic and everything. And I traveled to Sunspot to show everybody what happened. And then YouTube took my video down. So I drove all the way to Sunspot to show everybody that. And I got that from intelligence people. Additionally, DJI drones are nothing but anything made by DJI, whether it's a camera or it's a drone, anything made by DJI is a surveillance tool of the Chinese. So if you fly a DJI drone, you have to have a cell phone or a tablet to use it, and it has to have an internet connection. So when you fly that drone or use that camera, every second it takes a high resolution image. And when you connect to, and that high resolution gives you GPS, longitude, latitude, azimuth, elevation, aspect ratio, and everything of the camera. And when you connect to the internet, and that phone or tablet or whatever connects to China, it uploads those images to China in real time. And the way I know that is because when I used to be senior technical staff for CECOM, Communications and Electronics Command for the U.S. Army, one of the things that my laboratory came up with was a packet sniffer. And we would put that on to the networks because everything came back through us. So if you're at a forward base in Afghanistan or Iraq or anywhere else, when you communicate out of that military base over the internet, it goes up through a satellite, it comes back down. It used to be in Eatontown, New Jersey at Fort Monmouth. And then it goes through our network, and then what is supposed to go out over the regular internet for email, phone calls, what have you. That's why if you're ever deployed overseas, you have a satellite phone or you have a cell phone, it has a 732 telephone number as the area code. I was in charge of all wireless communications for the U.S. Army, from everything from an HF radio to SATCOM. So all of that was under my office. So we put a packet sniffer. The guy by the name of Kevin came up with it. And so we put a packet sniffer on the line. So it was that every packet of information that was coming out of a FOB, a forward operating base, we could see where these packets were going. And so there was a military, we had a FOB in Afghanistan, and that FOB in Afghanistan kept sending packets to China. And so we found out what phone was sending the packets. And we found out where the packets were going in China. And so we sent people to Afghanistan under command of a 2-star general, and we went over there and found the guy with the cell phone that was sending the packets. And come to find out, that phone was hooked to a DJI drone, and that DJI drone, every time that we would fly a mission over there, it was sending it back through that phone and sending it back to China. And that's why the NSA banned DJI drones for use by the U.S. military. In fact, the U.S. government is only allowed to use a DJI drone if it's an absolute emergency or for wildland firefighting. All other U.S. government agencies are banned from using DJI products. And Biden opened that back up so they could do it. And Trump hasn't reinstated it. So for the entire Biden administration, DJI has been spying on the United States, and Trump hasn't stopped it. And that's the real story of that. You can look it up.
Well, that raises the question, he said, oh, I know what the drones are, and I don't know why they aren't telling people. Well, he's been president. We haven't heard about what the drones were. All these drone sightings, right?
Most of the drone sightings were just people looking at airplanes. I know what drones were there. I know people that were involved in the program. I've even shown the drones that were flown, that the ones that the helicopters were flying, they were all on a mission. They were actually looking. They were using the drones to look for a radioactive source that had been lost. And these drones have sensors on them to look for radioactive material. And so they found the source, and the drones didn't, but the government found the source finally. And the drones were used for that, but they didn't want anybody to know what drone it was, and they didn't want to talk about it. But I have actually shown the drones on my show multiple times. In fact, we just showed it again the other night. And we even identified the company that made the drones. And then the government came out and said they were all authorized, they were all supposed to be there, and they were. But about 90% of the drone sightings weren't drones. They were aircraft at a distance, and people just didn't know what they were looking at.
So in other words, there was a hysteria effect.
Absolutely. Massive hysteria.
Yeah. That's what we find with these kind of things. Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, we got to the bottom of that for them. So what else would you like to cover?
Well, I think we've been going for 2 hours now. Maybe we enough for now, but we should do this again soon, especially as everything is developing so quickly.
I'll agree with that, and I think it's only going to get worse as we go on, because we're seeing a lot of things taking place. I mean, the simple fact that, and let me get another map up here so I can show you. Let me bring this one up. The simple fact that when you look at Europe and you look at the Middle East and so on and so forth, and you realize that our government has shut down all ISR flights. Mm-hmm. I mean, the skies are quiet. The only thing flying is Black Cat 5, which is an MQ-4 Global Hawk. It's the same thing that the Air Force has, except for it has a heavier airframe and a different radar on it, but it's basically a Global Hawk, and it's owned by the Navy instead of the Air Force. When you realize that the only ISR aircraft flying over all of Europe are 2 U.S. Army contracted Bombardier Challenger 650 aircraft and 1 aircraft from the Navy, you will quickly realize that the U.S. government is no longer supporting NATO with intelligence.
That is just like pulling the rug out from under them.
Exactly. Absolutely. There is no more. We used to track 20 to 30 surveillance aircraft at a time throughout a 24-hour period. In the last 48 hours, there have been 3 aircraft aloft.
And just to give the listeners the sense of it, how many are normally aloft doing the job?
In a 24-hour period, 20 to 30. At any time, it could be 7.
This is almost a 90% decrease in electronic warfare activity in the sighting and the intelligence activity.
Correct. It's starting 48 hours ago when Trump threw Zelensky out of the Oval Office.
So Trump wasn't just punishing Zelensky. He then turned his attention to punish all of NATO.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is not surprising.
Yeah, so it's been a bad day for the world, as far as I'm concerned. I mean, I've been monitoring this stuff for a decade. I've been on the air with it for over 4 years of covering the war. I started a year before the Russians went into Ukraine. I started tracking Russian assets moving towards the border with Ukraine. Mm-hmm. And I was the one that called it. I told everybody that Russia would invade within the next 72 hours, and 48 hours later they went in. And I had 274 what we called spooky cams that I had mapped out with IP addresses that we could hack into and watch. And we watched as the Russians came across the border. When nobody else, when we were telling people that Russia was invading Ukraine, we had hundreds of people coming onto our channel saying we were full of shit, we were fear porn, this was fake news, clickbait. And we're like, watch the cameras, folks. Those are Russian troops, and they're coming across in Ukraine, and here they are. And we were able to stream those live cameras for about a week until the Russians caught on to what was going on, and then they went around with sticks and climbed up on tops of vehicles and whacked the cameras off the poles and cut cables and all kinds of other things to turn off the cameras. And the other thing we've noticed is starting about, well, you can ask the guys in the chat, starting about 30 days ago, the cameras along the border with Kaliningrad and the cameras along the border in Belarus and the cameras in Belarus, they've cut them off. So all of the cameras that the Russians have along the border, they've cut off. All the cameras that the Belarusians have along the border, they've cut off. And all of the cameras that that are along the border in Kaliningrad, they've cut off. We've only been able to find, we had close to 100 cameras total between Belarus, Russia, and Kaliningrad, and I think we have about 5 or 6 that are still operational.
Do you know, is the United States going to pull its electronic warfare and precision guidance aircraft out of Europe?
They've already started.
They've started to move them.
Yeah, they moved 2 of them out yesterday.
Does that mean the U.S. is going to pull other military assets out of NATO now, too?
Well, the crazy part about it was Trump just gave up the military base in Greece, the key NATO location in Greece that the U.S. had an agreement with Greece for. Trump just gave that up.
Hold on. I know the Greek newspaper, Demokratia, reported that. But then they asked Trump at his meeting with Macron whether that report was true, and he said it wasn't. So
well, I've gotten to the point where I don't believe
got contradicted. So what is the truth then there?
The truth is, as far as I know, we haven't seen a single aircraft fly in and out of there since the announcement.
Have they withdrawn anything from the base?
I can't tell you whether they've withdrawn it, but all I can say you is that there hasn't been an aircraft fly in and out of there since then. And considering the fact that Trump called Zelensky a dictator for 2 weeks and said that Zelensky was preventing Ukraine from having elections, when Ukraine can't have an election during a war, the parliament votes for that because they're in a state of emergency. Zelensky isn't a dictator. And then when Trump was asked point blank, you've been calling Zelensky a dictator, Trump says, did I say that?
Yeah, that's right. He just lied again.
Right.
Yeah, the guy, I mean, there's no, look, with the, cluster B personalities like Mr. Trump, there's no truth and there's no right or wrong. There's just whatever he says in the moment when he feels like it.
Yeah, and then to make the outlandish claim that the United States has given Ukraine $350 billion in arms.
Yeah, no, there's nothing like that. No, obviously not.
And
I knew
that
years ago that the amount being sent was not the amount being claimed. And of course, that's not surprising to me. I heard it from both American and Ukrainian sources that were telling me that.
Well, I got my numbers from General Kellogg.
Oh, what did Kellogg tell you?
So General Kellogg says, and this is a quote directly from him about 3 weeks ago.
Yep.
The story of $174 billion sent to Ukraine as aid is a myth, says Special Representative Kellogg. The U.S. has only approved $65.9 billion in military aid to Ukraine. That's $22 billion per year.
That's much less, by the way, than we were given to the tiny country of Afghanistan.
Absolutely. In addition to that, over 51.2 billion of that, okay, so 80% of this military aid to Ukraine was actually spent in the U.S. on its own defense industry. And that's because what we sent to Ukraine was our hand-me-downs. Because people don't realize that missiles and bombs have a shelf life. Explosives are only good for so many years. Missiles, the propellant is only good for so many years. That shit starts to separate. And then you have failures. It's just like the batteries on Stinger missiles. Well, if you don't fire a Stinger within so many years, it'll never make it to the target because the battery will die before it gets there. So we pay hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars a year to destroy our own weapons. Or to take the weapon apart and take the explosives out and take the propellant out and put new explosives and new propellant in those weapons. Because it's not like black powder in a shotgun shell. These are high explosives, they're compounds, and over time they will separate. Just like the nitroglycerin will come out of the clay in dynamite. So it sweats and comes out. The exact same thing happens with high explosives.
So Biden was not really supporting Ukraine. It was a token show, and Kellogg has said that in his his Radio Liberty interview last April. He made that statement.
The worst part about it was all of these Democrats and others that were even Republicans that were supporting what was going on in Ukraine, they were getting kickbacks. And the way they were doing it was, and Zelensky even said this in an interview, he said they would give me weapons and they would give me money, and then they would tell me that I had to spend the money with these contractors to fly the weapons or deliver them into Ukraine. And he says, I have my own planes. I could have flown all of that stuff in for under $1 million. They would charge me $10 million to deliver a load when I could have done it with my own planes for under $1 million.
Yeah.
But if I wanted the weapons, that's what I had to do.
Yeah, it was unbelievable. These people are, I'm sorry, but we need treason trials in the United States.
Exactly.
And they can come to my house and assassinate me and murder me. Come on, come get me, because that's what it's going to come down to. We're going to have treason trials in this country. We're going to find out all these people, these thieves and these traitors. We're going to find them one day, or there won't be an America. We'll all be dead. That's fine. We'll all take a dirt nap. But you know what? I'll sleep better in that dirt nap than they will.
Yeah, well, it's going to be hot where they're going. That's
Yeah, they dreamt they went to hell and the heat woke them up.
Yeah. It's going to be a bad day for them. But the truth is out there. They're just trying like hell to hide it. And
it's amazing the lying. I just can't believe the number of people. I mean, these various truths have been around a long time. I mean, I just noticed them years ago and started talking about it, and I was persona non grata everywhere. And one day, all of these people are going to be found out, because the truth, in the end, that's what it ends up being. And that's what was it? One day, the devil's going to call your name, and your deal's going to come due. You're going to have to hand your soul over then.
It gets me, and we should have a talk. I don't know how much you know about the deep state, but we should have a talk one night about the deep state, because I worked for the government for 30 years, and I know how corrupt our government is.
Yeah, they want to talk about Ukraine being corrupt. I mean, good grief.
They're nothing compared to the U.S.
I mean, there's so much money here to steal, and they do. And we should have a talk, and we should talk about these dogs, these Doge people, these doggies. We should talk about what's going on there with the cleaning house in the government. Is it really cleaning house, or are we just getting cleaned by a different set of people?
Yeah, well, I was concerned when they got rid of all of the inspectors of nuclear weapons.
Yeah, that was really dumb, huh? Was that on purpose, accidental? Did they? I heard they.
Well, this is to me. I think that they aren't qualified. It's nice to have people who are smart, but you got to have people with some age and some people with some experience. It's like he put Pete Hegseth in as the Secretary of Defense. Now, do I personally have something against Pete Hegseth? Absolutely not. But Pete Hegseth doesn't have the knowledge base or the experience or even the age to be the Secretary of Defense. Pete Hegseth doesn't even know what he doesn't know.
Yeah, that's true for all of Trump's appointments. All of them seem to be wrong.
Well, the thing that gets me is so many of them are Russian supporters.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, look at Director of National Intelligence. She actually snuck into Syria and met with Assad. And then came back and said Assad's not a bad guy. After he had gassed 600,000 of his own people.
Well, she wouldn't say that Snowden was a traitor.
Right.
Now, I gave her the benefit of the doubt, and I said, well, she's trying to clean up the CIA and the other intelligence agencies. So you gotta make sure the other traitors can get a way out. Here, we'll treat you like a whistleblower. Come on, tell us what you know. Tell us what you've given the Russians. I took it that way. But I'm beginning with Trump's behavior. I'm beginning to doubt all of his appointments. And Marco Rubio, what is he doing being Secretary of State? He's never had anything like that kind of experience. He's a United States Senator and not a particularly distinguished one in my view. So what is that?
Yeah, again, you're absolutely right. I can't see. I mean, it's like one of the guys in my chat says, he has a hard time believing that Trump is a Russian asset. And my response to him is, how can you explain him calling Zelensky a dictator, calling for Zelensky to be voted out and talking up Putin at the exact same time? And then when being asked about calling Zelensky a dictator, when actually Putin is a dictator, when being asked about Zelensky being a dictator, Trump says, "Did I say that?" And then why is it that Trump has had all of these calls with Putin on the phone? And find me a single time Trump has been in the public light since 78? Okay, 76. Trump's been a worldwide name.
A celebrity, billionaire, millionaire.
Absolutely. In all of that time, find me a single time that Trump has ever said anything bad about Russia or Trump has ever said anything bad about Putin.
Or the Soviet Union, by the way.
Or the Soviet Union.
He paid for a bunch of ads in the 80s that were putting out basically Soviet talking points.
Correct. It was Soviet propaganda in 1987 that he put in the New York Times and a few other newspapers, and he spent $87,000 then. That's equivalent to $257,000 now.
Well,
at the time he published that, his total net worth was only $400 million.
Yeah. What a lot of people didn't notice was during the 7 minutes of mayhem in the Oval Office meeting on Friday, what people didn't notice, which was rather surprising to me, was that the question of the Polish journalist was really what began the mayhem when he asked Trump why he was aligning with Russia. And it seemed to really stir Trump up. You saw Trump became a bit agitated with that question.
Yeah, and when the other journalists asked, well, what about if after this is signed, what if the Russians attack? And Trump said, well, what if a bomb lands on your head? That was an actual question. That was a good question. What are we going to do? What kind of a security guarantee if Zelensky signs this, what kind of guarantee this is the way I look at it. Why, and Zelensky even said this himself, why would he give up the rights to the minerals in his country without some type of security to back it up? He said, they're not my minerals to give away. They belong to my people. So why would Zelensky sign that agreement to give up those minerals in exchange for $350 billion, which is a non-existent number? That number doesn't exist anywhere. $350 billion is equivalent to what Ukraine has received from both Europe, the rest of the world, and the U.S. combined. And in fact, when you look at GDP, the amounts of GDP by country of what has been given to Ukraine, the United States is ranked 17th, not first, of percentage of GDP. So it's a lot of stuff didn't make sense to me in that meeting whatsoever. I mean, why wouldn't he answer any type of security guarantee? And that's what Zelensky was talking about. You know, what are you talking about? What type of negotiations or diplomacy are you talking about? Russia has signed 25 times with Ukraine, with the UK, with France, with other countries over there, and all 25 times he has signed, he's broken it.
Yeah. Well, there was one appropriate answer for the president. The vice president had no business even speaking in that meeting. But the one answer was, don't worry, Mr. President, Zelensky, we're going to work that out. You're going to be satisfied. Don't worry. That would have been the appropriate answer.
Right, but he couldn't get that, and he said, I'm confident that the Russians won't do anything. How confident can you be that the Russians aren't going to do anything? What has Trump ever prevented the Russians from doing?
Yeah, this braggadocio where he says this war would have never happened if I were president. It was the war in Donbass was going on when he was president. As Zelensky pointed out, there were people dying on the line of contact during the entirety of President Trump's presidency. So what in the heck is he talking about? There wouldn't have been a war. There was a war already between Russia and Ukraine in Donbass. That war just exploded into a full-blown war in 2022. So I don't understand Trump, and it makes no sense. It's really disappointing because I was holding out hope that Trump was not a Russian agent, that he was not what the left said he was, and to the left, I say, I'm sorry. You guys were right about him. Of course, you're wrong about everything else, almost everything else. Nobody's wrong about everything, and I'm not right about everything. And this was something that, I feel embarrassed by. I really do.
Likewise, I thought Trump was going to be, and I even went on show and said, look, when Trump was in office the first time, he's the one that actually gave Ukraine the Javelin missiles. He was the first one to actually deliver weapons to Ukraine, but it wasn't enough. And then as soon as Trump left, the Russians started planning to bring it in again, and they did. It took them that long to build everything up. So it took them 13 months, 14 months, 15 months if you count from the election. Yeah. But I think the Russians thought that Trump was going to fight it and win, and he didn't. And when they found out that Biden was going to be in there and Biden was just Obama 2.0, they said, oh, fuck it, we'll go right in. And Biden even said that they weren't going to fight Russia because he was scared of World War III. When come to find out, Trump used the exact same lines that Biden did. You're going to start World War III out of this. That's a Biden line.
Yeah, it is. You see, the thing is then what's really disgusting about Trump is that instead of blaming Putin's aggression for the possibility of World War III, and it's the people threatening World War III are the Russians, he's blaming the victim of Russian aggression. And for those that reviled Chamberlain for going to Munich in 1938 instead of standing up to Hitler, appeasing him, this is much worse. Because Hitler had not committed military aggression at that time. There was the Anschluss, but there was no battle. Austria welcomed the Nazis in 1938. But what's really interesting is that here, the country at stake has already been invaded. The war has been fought for 3 years. The atrocities against civilians, the kidnapping of children, the brazenness of the invasion, and the violation of international law, it's already taken place. Hitler had not done any of those things in 1938 when Chamberlain went. Chamberlain said, look, we treated the Germans bad. Versailles was bad. Let's give them a break. Let's show that we have goodwill. Let's prevent another war. Chamberlain had an argument. Trump doesn't have one. We know Putin is bad. We know the Kremlin is evil. We know they're allied with our enemies, with China and the rest of the communists, and with the fifth column in this country, which turns out to be inside MAGA, and the right, and the tech right, I think. just like it's on the left. The Russians and the Chinese have infiltrated both political parties and all of the different parts of our industry, and we let it happen. We need treason trials. We need to get rid of these people who've infiltrated our country. The enemy within has to be defeated, and we have to unite with all people of goodwill throughout the world to stop these dictators from taking over the world.
You got that right. All right, well, that sounds like a good place to end it there, my friend. I want to thank you for spending 2.5 hours with us here despite the technical difficulties. And I really want to do this again. You let me know when you're available, and I'll make the time for you. We can do it, next weekend, the following weekend. You just tell me when you're available, and I'll make the time available for you.
All right, that sounds good, Lee. Sounds
All right.
really good.
Thank you, Jeff. I greatly appreciate your time and your knowledge. It's been an honor to have you here.
Right.
Thank you much.
Thank you. Okay,
all right,
good.
folks, that's going to do it for us. Want to thank all of you for joining us. I'm going to upload this onto YouTube so you folks can see it over there. And you guys have a great weekend. After I've uploaded this onto YouTube, I'll be back with another War Watch. Thanks for being here, everybody. Have a great night.
That's all, folks.